Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Holy Tuesday. We are going to be in the Gospel of Mark today. We have started off with chapter 11 with a triumphant entry. We worked our way yesterday on Holy Monday as Jesus went into the city. He cursed a fig tree on his way in. He had an exchange with the temple money changers, and then we caught him on his way back into town the following day, Tuesday. We actually covered this a little bit yesterday when he saw that fig tree again. But here on Holy Tuesday, we're looking at how Jesus goes back into the temple, and this time he begins teaching. And his authority will be challenged at the end of chapter 11, but chapter 12 is filled with rich material that I want to invite you to read on your own. I want to draw your attention particularly to the beginning of chapter 12. It's the parable of the evil farmers. Reading this parable will help you understand so much of what's going on here for Jesus and why the Pharisees are mad at him, because he is making direct accusations about what they're up to. Chapter 12 goes on to have Jesus discuss the resurrection, what the most important commandment is, and whose son the Messiah is. But what I really want to draw in on is at the very beginning of chapter 13. This is what we read. As Jesus was leaving the temple that day, one of his disciples said, "Teacher, look at these magnificent buildings. Look at the impressive stones in the walls." And Jesus replied, "Yes, look at these great buildings, but they will be completely demolished. Not one stone will be left on top of another." Now, there's a whole lot of things that Jesus could be referring to. We know that in 70 AD, the temple would be destroyed. Jerusalem would be sacked. But I suspect that Jesus is talking about more than just that. He certainly is talking about that. But I think he's also talking about what the temple represents. And that is why I made mention of that parable about the evil farmers. And to really understand it, we have to go all the way back to Genesis chapter 1. In Genesis chapter 1, very, very beginning, it says, God created the heavens and the earth. The idea when God created that was that heaven and earth were united, and that Adam and Eve lived fully in the presence of God. But we know what happens in chapter 3. Adam and Eve make the decision to try to go it on their own, to try to have control of their own destinies. They ultimately separate themselves from God, and sin and death enters the story. Heaven and earth are then divided, and God's desire is to bring us back into union with him. And that's where the temple comes in later. The temple is a place, an opportunity for humanity to come back and be in the presence of God. When we think about the sacrificial system and all of that, the idea is then that we get to cleanse ourselves, to be pure, to rid ourselves of our sins so that we can actually be in God's presence. And so that's why we see how the temple is constructed in that way, so that we can get ourselves cleaned up before we walk into the Holy of Holies. That's what the temple was supposed to be about. It was supposed to be an opportunity for us to come into the presence of God. And if we've come into the presence of God and realize how awesome God is, why would we not want to experience that awesomeness all the time? That was God's goal of the temple, that we could come experience him and then crave being in relationship with him. But what had the teachers of religious law done? They'd found a way to control access to God. They found a way to manipulate it. And now the idea of the temple was no longer a place of reuniting us with our Creator. It was now a way of exploiting others for religious goods and services. And Jesus was not interested in that. Jesus was making clear that this building, and as impressive as it is now completely under the control of humanity, and it is no longer of value to God. In fact, if you want to experience the presence of God, the only way to do that is by way of Jesus Christ, who declares that he is the way, the truth, and the life. That's what Jesus comes to do. He comes to blow apart the temple system, which had been corrupted by humanity, so that we could live in God's presence directly. So as we think about what this means to us in Holy Week, we want and crave to be in God's presence. If we've tasted that and come to understand what His love means to us, then why would we not want to be in God's presence? And more importantly, we want to share that gift with others. That's what I've been saying about Holy Week this whole week, is that we get to see this as an opportunity to invite people to a place where they can experience God. Not for the sake of coming into a building to worship God there and become members of an organization. Not at all. It's about bringing people into a place where we can all experience God's presence together and then recognize that His presence is available to us beyond the walls of the church. So that's my prayer for us today, is that we would recognize what God is doing here. He wants us to be in His presence. And He wants us, those of us who have experienced that, to share it with the world around us. So please keep praying for your neighbors. Keep inviting people to come join us on Easter Sunday so that they can experience the presence of God, not for the sake of them being isolated, but for the sake of them being able to recognize God's presence all over the world around them. That's what we want. We want to all know God's love, because when we realize that the temple is blown up and that Jesus is inviting us to be completely reunited with the Father, that's when the world can change. Have an amazing day, everyone.